Hello, good afternoon. Today we'll be discussing about the examination of the witness. Let's start with the oral evidence. If we see oral evidence is adduced in the court, or let's say it's produced in the court by giving way of answers to the questions that are put to the witness by the counsels. If you see section 37 of Evidence Act 2031, it says that except in the condition where it is compulsory to produce a document to prove any fact pursuant to this act, that is Evidence Act, in other conditions of fact may be proved by the oral evidence. And the oral evidence has to be direct in nature, to mean if the evidence has to be produced on the fact which could have been seen, heard, or felt with the help of any sense, that evidence has to be produced by the person who has directly seen, heard, or felt as an oral evidence. That means no any kind of hearsay evidence can be produced as oral evidence in the court. For example, if the person A has been produced as witness, the person A should have seen, felt, or heard about the incidents or about the fact that need to be proved directly by his or her own sense organs. So it should not be a hearsay evidence. The oral evidence given by a person as a witness before the court who hears or knows such fact in the meantime when it was expressed directly is admissible as an evidence. However, this needs to go through a thorough examination. That means examination means to testify the witness about the relevancy to find out his or her knowledge, confidence, so on for the subject matter. So basically it is about examining whether the particular witness is speaking true about what he has seen or not, whether he has enough confidence about what he has spoken relating to the incidents or not. So the witness testifies by giving answer to the examination in chief, followed by the cross-examination by the opposing party and re-examination by the calling party. So basically if you see, there are three forms of questions that are put to the witness. So the first is examination in chief. We will discuss it in, separately. Second is cross-examination, and third is re-examination. So let's come to the first process, examination in chief. So it is the process whereby a party who has called a witness to give evidence on his behalf elicits from that witness evidence relevant to the issues and favorable to the examiner's case. That means for example, if the prosecutor has called the witness and if the prosecutor at first asks the witness evidence relevant to the issues and favorable to the prosecutor's part, or let's say claim, then it is the examination in chief. Okay, so it's a whereby it doesn't always mean that the prosecutor should do the examination in chief. For example, if the defendant has called his or her witness, the defendant at the first hand asks the witness those evidences that are relevant to their part. The witness is examined in chief when the party calling him questions in the court for the first time. That means prosecutor will ask the question to his or her witness and defendant will ask question to his or her witness. This is to mean examination is in chief is a question put by the calling party to the witness, and that calling party may either be the defendant or the prosecutor, so that the latter will tell the story about the fact he is asked. That means as per the questions that are put forwarded by the prosecutor or the defendant, the witness will be telling the story about the fact. So at the stage of examination in chief, the lawyers are entitled to put such questions which are relevant to the fact in issue. As already we know what is fact in issue and what are relevant fact, the examination in chief stage is very important as the questions relevant to the fact in issue are asked. So they cannot put leading questions. Leading questions hereby means those kind of questions in which suggest or which direct the answer by itself. If the question leads the answer itself. For example, The leading questions, I will also discuss it in the cross-examination part. Leading questions are those which are very direct and close-ended. That means you only have very limited options to answer, either in yes or no. So questions which suggest answers are regarded as the leading questions, whose usual answer would be yes, in yes or no form. The question put in examination in chief shall only relate to the facts which are relevant to the issue to be decided, that is fact and issue, and to such facts of which the witness has direct or indirect knowledge. So if we see, the very important phase is the examination in chief, that we also call it as a direct examination. In this phase, the party calling the witness will ask the first questions to the witness, and these kind of questions, the type of questions that are asked should not be leading. That means it should not suggest the answer in itself. Rather, they should be related to the fact and issue, and they should be related to such facts to which the witness has direct or indirect knowledge. So if we see the question pattern of the examination in chief, it is like more kind of question which demands the narrative answer. That means the purpose is telling your side of the case, what the witness has seen or heard or observed on the scene of crime. So it's like more like a storytelling, what you have observed, what you have seen, what you have heard, as such. So basically open-ended questions are used to encourage the storytelling in the examination in chief. So direct examination will begin with WH questions, like like who, what, where, when, why, and how. So the witness is the focus here, because the witness is telling their side of the story and not the attorney. So more and more open-ended questions are offered to the witness, so that they will be able to describe in detail the situation, whatever happened. They will be able to describe all the things in the scene of crime. So questions will be like, what happened next, what else, if anything, did you learn about that night, when did you first learn something was wrong, how did the scene appear when you arrived. So these all kind of questions that helps the witness to narrate the whole story, to narrate whatever the fact he or she wants to give it to the court. So this kind of WS questions will be asked in the examination in chief. Let's come to cross-examination. So if you see, the first phase is the examination in chief or direct examination, that is done by the calling party to the witness, and the second phase is the cross-examination. Cross-examination is questioning of a witness at a trial or hearing by the party opposed to the party who called the witness to testify. For example, if the prosecutor has called witness A, then prosecutor asks the questions or do the direct examination to witness A. And in the second phase, the defense asks the questions or do the cross-examination to the witness A. So it happens simultaneously. That means the party opposed to the party who has called the witness to testify will be questioning during the cross-examination. So after a party examines his witness in chief, his opponent has right to cross-examine him. Cross-examination follows immediately after the examination in chief unless the court for some reason postpones it. So it happens immediately after the direct examination. So it is a method by which a party to an action proves the credibility of an adverse witness. That means the defense will try to discredit the witness of the prosecutor, like by asking questions to make sure whether he is speaking true or not, whether he has observed fact correctly or not. So in asking such questions, the examiner tries to weaken the testimony of a witness given through the examination in chief. For example, the prosecutor have asked a lot of narrative things during the direct examination to the witness A. Then the defense during the cross-examination to witness A will try to question everything that he or she has narrated to the court. That means the defense will try to weaken or try to lose the confidence of the testimony of the witness in the cross-examination. So the purpose of cross-examination is for the witness evidence in chief to be tested for its accuracy and completeness. That means during the cross examination, the opposing party will try to check the accuracy, the completeness, whether it is like a very incomplete information, or it's a very vague information, it's a information generated by misunderstanding or misabsorbing. These all things are actually tested during the cross examination. So if you see, according to Cross and Wilkins, the objective of the cross examination are conducted that are conducted by the opposite party are basically two. The first is to elicit evidence directly relevant to the issue, which is favorable to the cross examiner's case. Second, to discredit the witness. So basically what Cross and Wilkins says is there are two major objectives of the cross examination. One is to generate the evidence from that particular witness that are favorable to the defense side, and second, to discredit the witness. That means to lose the confidence, or to lose the confidence of the witness, to question whatever the witness had just narrated in the examination in chief, as such to make them doubtful, to make them like less confidence about what they have spoken in during the direct examination. So the cross-examiner will seek to elicit from the witness any further evidence which may undermine the case of the party who called him or support the case of the cross-examining party. For example, by showing that the witness evidence was based on a mistaken understanding of the events. Here the major objective of the cross-examiner will be to question a witness in such a way, thereby to make the court understand that the witness was not in a proper position to observe or see things or to interpret things in the court. So according to Taylor, cross-examination is the motive to prevent truth, are so much numerous in judicial investigation than in the ordinary affairs of life, and the danger of injustice arising from this cause. So basically it's like preventing the truth in the judicial investigation. The cross-examination of the witness is also known as the process whereby the purity of the fact, whether the fact is true or not from the witness, is checked by the opposite party. So it does not protect the rights of the party, or you say cross-examination is one of the greatest weapon for testing the veracity, the accurateness of the statement made by a person. So you see, it is both a sword of attack and a side of defense for the opposite party. So if it is not possible to obtain anything favorable from the witness, the cross-examiner will cross-examine the witness as to credit that is seek to undermine the weight of his evidence by attaching his or her character. Okay, so the first thing they try to do is to generate or elicit the evidence that are in favor to the opposing party, and if it is not possible enough to obtain any such favorable facts that helps for the opposite party, the cross-examiner now will be discrediting the character or the statement made by such kind of witness by kind of linking his or her character. He or she may try to show the witness ought not to be believed on oath because of his past conduct, his previous convictions, and his relationship with the party who called him, or his previous inconsistent statements. That means the opposing party will try to question on the belief, like why are we believing that particular witness. They will the opposing party will be questioning about his or her character, what he has here done in the past. So the person is not worth believing. Whatever he or she is saying, she is saying because of the favorable relationship with the party or as such. So it's about discrediting the statement or the narrative story, whatever the witness had spoken during the direct examination. So if you see, the cross-examination phase is a very important phase, and because it has a lot of importance. The first is testing the representation or to misrepresentation of the witness in the case, whether a actual witness has been brought to the case or a false witness has been brought to the case. It is checked, it can be checked by the cross examination. Second, it's also a way of collecting real information about the incident. That means a person is put in a thorough questioning to cross check whatever he or she has seen in the cross examination. So when the witness comes contradicts, it creates some doubt about the incident. So through as many leading questions as possible, the story or the narration that the witness has spoken, has given during the examination in chief will be cross-checked, and if the person is not sure enough, it creates doubt about the incident. So court gives priority for cross-examination of witness and takes strong evidence of the statement of the witness, because it might give an important clue if any kind of contradictory information arises. So it helps to give the primary and secondary fact in the relevant case. It also helps the court to find out the judgments, and it also helps the advisory party to make the arguments based on whatever comes out during the cross-examination. So it's basically used to further your theory of case, to elicit testimony favorable to your side. That means that is favorable to the opposite party who is doing the cross-examination. So basically there are just a very few points to cover during the cross-examination. As such, unlike the examination in chief, cross-examination may be like for a limited questions, because they are only to check whatever the information given are true or not. However, examination in chief is a very detailed process, as it is related to the narration of all the whole story. It's about detailing all the descriptions, it's about explaining all the things that he or she have seen. So examination in chief is like a more detailed thing. But in cross-examination, only one point should be made per questions in order to be clear and in order to remove all the doubts. So questions are very short, simple, and close-ended and leading. So they should suggest either yes or no in answer. So questions should not be argumentative or ambiguous or vague in nature. The attorney here is the focus, not the witness, because attorney is the one who poses such kind of questions to the witness. So if we see what kind of close-ended questions are used, so you are alone in room. That means whether yes or no only should be the answer of the witness. They will not be in a position to explain things in the cross-examination. So no one else was present when the gun was fired. So these kind of questions are basically asked during the cross-examination. So if you see what is the difference between the examination in chief and cross-examination, here as I already said, the direct examination is more like a very detailed process to allow the witness to tell their side of the story. But in cross-examination, you do not want the witness to tell the story or narrate the things that he or she have seen. Okay, so you indicate the point you wish to make and put it to the witness. What happens is, in examination in chief, you allow the witness to speak whatever they have felt and they have seen or they have observed. But in cross-examination, you indicate the questions and try to generate the answer in your own way, that whatever you wish. So leading questions therefore are used in cross-examination. So you do not allow the witness to speak their opinion, rather you drag them with such questions to answer them in your favor, basically. So leading questions provide for more effective cross-examination because the facts are supplied by the advocate instead of the witness, and the advocate has must in control in order to get the point that they want to make. So they will be stressing on those facts which they want to generate from the witness. So they will design such kind of leading questions so that the witness will be speaking in their favor. So during cross-examination, you do not want a witness to tell their side of story. You want them to verify the particular matters that you put to them. So whether you are present in the scene of crime or not, whether it was night time or not, what is your do you have enough eye power or vision capability to see and observe things at night. These kind of things are questioned by the attorney during the cross-examination. Then comes the process of the re-examination. So once a witness has been cross-examined, the party who called him is entitled to repair any damage done to his evidence in chief by asking further question on the matters which arose during the cross-examination. Here, for example, if the prosecutor has done the direct examination to his witness A, then the defense do the cross-examination to the witness A. And after finishing the cross-examination, if the prosecutor wants to clarify certain things that are raised during the cross-examination, the prosecutor can again examine the witness A. That means re-examination can take place. So re-examination is only limited to the questions that are put, or only limited to the matters that are put forward during the cross-examination. Re-examination logically results from the interaction between the examination in chief and cross-examination. So if you see, whatever the things have been asked during the examination in chief, that are cross-checked, verified, their veracity is checked during the cross-examination. But if certain things are being doubtful during the cross-examination, and the calling party of the witness thinks that it is necessary, it is important to clarify it, then only the re-examination is done. So if testimony which is given in answer to the examination in chief is discredited by cross-examination or shown to be doubtful, erroneous, or untrue, the party who has called the witness could re-examine the witness in a way to cure what is damaged during the cross-examination. So re-examination is confined to issues that were covered in the cross-examination. So questions such as whether re-examination exceeds the scope of cross-examination are ultimately rest in the discretion of the court. So in brief, re-examination means further examination in chief by the examiner in chief. That means if the prosecutor has done the direct examination, and if again after the cross-examination the prosecutor wants to question the witness, then it is the process of re-examination. So you have to note that the same rules apply to this examination as well. That is, no any kind of leading questions and no cross of your own witness without leave. So note that re-examination is not for the introduction of the new matters. It is about the clarifying things that were doubtful during the cross-examination only. So it is there for the clarification of the answers given on cross and for addressing the matters raised for the first time on the cross-examination. So let us just move towards the legal provisions. So if we see section 38 of Evidence Act 2031, it talks about the competency of a witness. So all persons, including the accomplice, may be competent to be a witness unless the court considers that they are prevented from understanding the questions put to them or from giving rational answers to those questions by tender years, extreme old age, physical or mental disease, or any other cause of. And section 39 of Evidence Act states about the dumb witness, where a witness who is unable to speak also may give his or her evidence in any other manner which he or she can make it intelligible, as by writing or by the sign language. So section 40 of the Evidence Act states that the parents etc. of the party shall not be compelled to be a witness. For example, the parents, son, daughter, husband, or wife of the party to the case shall not be compelled to be a witness against such party. Let's come to the section 41. which says that communication during the marriage shall not be compelled to disclose. So no person who is or has been married shall be compelled to disclose any communication between them during their marriage, and they shall be permitted to disclose any such communication unless the person who made it consents. So it's a like privileged communication. So except in case of between the husband and wife, or in a case in which one married person is prosecuted by the government as a plaintiff for any crime committed against the other spouse. So in section 42 it talks about not it talks about a judge, it talks about like judges are also not compelled to disclose any act done in that capacity. So no judge shall, except otherwise order has been made by the superior court, be compelled to answer any question which came to his or her knowledge, or regarding any act which he or she performed in the court as such as a judge. So he or she may be examined as a witness as to the matters which occurred in his or her presence while he or she was acting, or any other fact. Section 43 of the Evidence Act states about not to disclosing the fact that are mentioned in the unpublished government document laying in the government office. Okay, so except otherwise provided by the head of the department, no one shall disclose or submit any unpublished confidential document which is related to the government activities and laying in the government office. Section 44 states that the public officials shall not be compelled to disclose any information received in the capacity where he or she was working in the office, and the information is confidential as such, which the disclosure of which would suffer the public interest. Section 44A, inserted by the First Amendment, I guess, the police personnel shall not be compelled to disclose the source of information of the occurrence of the crime. So no any police personnel will be compelled to disclose any information of the source which he or she has received by any means regarding the occurrence of the crime. Let's come to the section 45. A law practitioner not to disclose any information given by his or her client. So it's also the privileged communication, unless with the written consent of his or her client's authority to disclose any communication made to him or her in the course of or for the purpose of the employment as a law practitioner. No any professional employment can disclose any advice given to him or her. In the section 46, here it says that a person shall not be compelled to disclose any communication between him or herself or the professional legal advisor. Section 47 talks about the witness, the duty of the witness, that he or she has to give the answer. A witness shall not be excused from answering any question upon the ground that the answer to such question may criminate him or her, provided that no such answer which a witness shall be compelled to give shall subject to him to any arrest or prosecution, and shall not be taken as an evidence in any other criminal case. So section 48 of the Evidence Act states that witness shall be produced and examined in the order so prescribed by the code. So section 49 is one of the main important sections which details about the procedure relating to the examination of the witness. So the general procedure of the examination of witness that takes place inside the court of law is the witness is made to take or swear to oath to speak the truth before providing the statement of the facts regarding what he or she has seen, known or heard. Second, witness shall be examined in the presence of all the parties to the case, provided that a witness may be examined in the presence of the parties who are present on the date and time appointed by the court for the examination of witness. Third, a witness shall be examined in such a manner that the examination of one witness shall not be heard by the another witness. For example, if there are 4 witnesses in a case, one at a time shall be done, thereby the other 3 cannot hear what the first witness told to the court. So in case it becomes essential to further examine any witness on the basis of any reasonable ground, tatimba, uh, that means further examination of a witness may be done only to the facts which was not clearly specified in the previous examination. For example, if the prosecution needs to question the witness again, then there must be certain issues that were not raised during the previous examination. Otherwise, they cannot be allowed to have the further examination. The parties to the case shall have to put signature on the top of the document of the statement of the witness. In case any party denies to put his or her signature, the judge shall note the same and put his or her signature. Let's come to the section 50, which is also an important section relating to the examination in chief and cross-examination. So in the course of cross-examination, in the course of the examination of witness, the party who calls the witness may conduct the examination in chief to his or her witness, the thing that we have already discussed. So thereafter, the adverse party to the case, if so desires, may conduct the cross-examination. Second, after the completion of the cross-examination by the adverse party, the party who calls the witness may conduct a re-examination of the witness, provided that the re-examination shall be directed to the explanation of the facts referred to in the cross-examination. This has been already discussed. A party to the case may ask question regarding any new fact which his or her witness, if it is so permitted by the court. So the permission of the court is necessary if the party to the case wants to ask any new fact with the witness, provided that the adverse party may cross-examine such witness again if any question on new facts is asked in the course of re-examination. For example, if during the re-examination the party calling the witness asked a new thing, then that should also be again cross-examined by the opposing party. So in the course of conducting examination in chief or re-examination, the party to the case shall not ask any leading question which suggests the intended answer, if so objected by the adverse party. The thing that we have already discussed, that during the direct examination and re-examination we cannot put the leading questions. The court shall provided that such questions may be asked with the permission of the court. However, if the counsel takes the permission of the court, he or she may ask the leading question, but the court shall permit leading questions only to the matters which are introductory in nature or undisputed, or which have, on its opinion, already been proved sufficiently. For example, like I said, the examination in chief is a very detailed narrative statement given by the witness in that particular phase. So if any kind of leading questions are of introductory in nature, then the court shall give the permission to the counsel to ask. Section 51 says that the court will forbid, or court can forbid to ask any unreasonable questions to the witness. If it is kind of like insulting or annoying the witness, the court may forbid the party to ask the questions. Section 52 talks about the examination in chief and cross-examination of the expert. So when it is necessary to reach to a conclusion regarding any fact relating to like special sectors such as signature, finger impression, law of a foreign country, science, custom, tradition, art, or any other similar subject, the court may cause to appear the person who deserves special expertise, experience, or training, and examine him or her as a witness, that we call as a expert witness. So in case an expert witness is to examined by the court, it has to provide opportunity to the parties to the case for cross-examination for such witness pursuant to this act. So section 53 of the Evidence Act says that court may ask necessary question with the witness if it deems necessary. So basically the whole chapter is about the examination of witness. There are three phases. Examination in chief, also known as direct examination, that is done by the party who has called the witness. Second is cross-examination, that is done by the opposing party. And third is re-examination, that is done by the calling party again, if he or she deems it necessary, and if he or she deems it necessary to explain things that are doubtful during the cross-examination. So basically we need to look at the legal provisions. The competency is given, the privileged communication, the types of privileged communications are given there, the procedure of the examination of witness, what are the general procedures in the court of law that are given in the legal provisions, and like what should be the type of questions, what kind of issues need to be asked during each phase of examination has been also reflected in the legal provisions. So if you have any questions, you can email it to me. Thank you.